I woke to the relentless buzzing of my phone. At first, I thought I was still trapped in the fog of anesthesia, but the numbers didn't lie. 73 missed calls. 73. I tried to sit up, my back screaming in protest. 9 hours under the surgeon's knife had left me fragile, but I ignored the pain. My hand shook as I pressed play on the voicemail. "Hey, we sold your condo." Dad's voice was calm, clinical, almost rehearsed. "It was to pay for your sister's wedding. You were unconscious, so we signed the papers for you." I pressed my palm to my mouth. $425,000. Gone. Just like that. The line clicked. I listened to it again. I thought I might wake from this nightmare, but it was real. I tried calling back. No answer. My mind raced. I could barely stand. My body protested every small movement, but the thought of what they had done pushed me upright. My vision blurred. My hands trembled. I tasted bile. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the monitors. I should have screamed. I should have lashed out, but I didn't. I sat calculating, waiting, watching. I pictured the wedding, the flowers, the music, her smiling face. How ordinary it would seem to everyone else. How normal. But behind that perfect day, they had struck. I thought of my sister, how she would laugh when she learned of my condo, how she would parade her triumph as if it were victory over me, not life itself. I counted the days in my head. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until her wedding. 3 weeks in which I could do something they wouldn't see coming. I let my mind go to the simplest, cruelest thought. They thought I was weak, helpless, that I would cry in my hospital bed, that I would let this slide. But weakness had been a lie I had perfected over years. I could pretend to be small, insignificant. I could smile and nod, let them mock me, dismiss me. But inside, every nerve, every thought, every waking moment was strategy. I stared at the phone again. The screen reflected my pale face, hollow-eyed but composed. They had no idea. None. I remembered one detail from the voicemail. Dad's tone, calm, smug, expecting a reaction, anticipating chaos. But chaos wasn't what I had planned. Something colder, something precise. I pressed a single button. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't confront. Not yet. I waited. Calculated, watched. The hum of the hospital, the quiet of the night, the stillness of my body betrayed nothing of the storm building inside me. The real storm, I knew, was about to begin. And when it did, they would remember that the person they underestimated, the one they tried to bury under surgeries, debt, and humiliation, was still in control. The reality hit me fully the next morning. Not just the money, not just the condo, but the betrayal. My own family, the people I had trusted, had orchestrated it while I was unconscious. I tried to imagine their reasoning. My sister, always the golden child, probably assumed I would forgive. Dad, methodical as ever, likely thought he had protected her pride. And Mom, she had never been subtle with her disdain. I remembered the way she would smirk at every minor victory of hers over me, as if my existence were a lesson in her superiority. I reviewed every detail I could remember before surgery, every conversation, every slight, every glance that seemed off. Patterns emerged, subtle, almost imperceptible manipulations I had ignored for years. They had prepared this long before I even went under. My life, my assets, my independence, they had calculated and waited for the perfect moment. The anger bubbled, but I forced myself to remain calm. Panic would serve them. Outrage would be predictable. I had learned over the years that control was the deadliest weapon. I would not let them see the storm inside. I called the bank first, checked every account, every number, every transaction. There it was gone. $425,000. My eyes burned, but I felt nothing. Not yet. I needed facts, not theatrics. And then the memories of past betrayals flooded back. My sister manipulating parents against me over small things, making me look foolish in front of relatives. My father's cold, calculated decisions that always favored her. My mother's subtle jabs, disguised as advice, always eroding my confidence. I realized this wasn't just a single act of greed. This was a pattern, a life built to suppress me. And yet, they underestimated me. As I lay in the hospital bed, unable to walk properly, I could still out-hink them. I could still outmaneuver them. And I would. The first step was understanding their weakness, pride, overconfidence, blind loyalty to the illusion that they controlled everything. I would let them continue believing that while I prepared my response, slow, deliberate, and precise. I thought about the wedding in 3 weeks, how perfect it would look on the outside, how smug they would feel, secure in their victory. And I knew once I revealed the truth, once I acted, the fallout would be nothing short of spectacular. But I needed patience. Patience, observation, and timing. I couldn't afford mistakes. Every interaction over the next few weeks would be a piece of the puzzle. Every detail mattered. Every movement, every word, every slip could be leveraged. I closed my eyes and imagined the confrontation. Not chaotic. Not screaming. Cold. Detached. Precise. Yes. They had taken what they thought was mine, but they had forgotten one thing. I had the mind to wait, to plan, to strike when the moment was perfect. And when that moment came, there would be no mercy, only truth. I started quietly, observing, listening. Every conversation, every glance, every casual remark was a thread I could pull. My sister, my parents, they didn't know I was awake, aware, and planning. I checked the condo records, even though it wasn't mine anymore. Every signature, every transfer, it was all clean. Too clean. That was their mistake. They assumed a perfect execution was enough. But I knew that perfection was only on paper. People always leave traces. I looked at my bank statements again. Every transaction told a story, not just about the money, but about behavior. Patterns emerged. Late-night transfers. Calls disguised as casual inquiries. My parents' own overconfidence. Their assumption that I was powerless. I watched my sister on social media. Small boasts. Subtle jabs, her way of rubbing it in. But it wasn't subtle to me. Every post. Every story. Every like told me more about her routines. Her friends. Her vulnerabilities. She was confident. Yes, but blind. I had to use that. The hospital staff had been surprisingly cooperative when I asked for quiet time. I had to be careful not to reveal too much about my condition. My legs were weak, my back in pain, but my mind was sharp. Pain, I realized, was irrelevant. I was building a strategy. Every day, every hour, added layers to it. I began small experiments. Calls to old contacts, silent alerts to my financial accounts, testing the limits of what they thought they controlled. How far could I push before they noticed? How quickly would panic set in? These were not just questions, they were pieces of my eventual plan. At nights, I stayed awake, reviewing phone logs and emails. The more I dug, the more evidence I found. Patterns of favoritism, tiny manipulations, small betrayals, all connected. The $425,000 wasn't just money. It was proof of a system built against me, lifetime of underestimation. And now, I had it all mapped. I thought about confrontation. Not yet. Too early. They believed themselves untouchable. But I knew that anticipation was a weapon. The longer I waited, the more mistakes they'd make. The more vulnerable they would become. Every minor slip and misdirected text, a social media comment, a boastful brag was recorded, noted, and stored. Everything would be used, not out of malice, not for revenge alone, but as evidence. The truth would speak for itself. And all the while, I remained outwardly calm, polite, slightly distant. My family believed I was weak, still recovering. My sister even laughed at my frailty, assuming it reflected helplessness. She had no idea that this was the eye of the storm. The pieces were falling into place. Timing, precision, observation, they would define the impact of the moment when I finally acted. It wasn't about anger. It was about control. And control, once grasped, was absolute. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and imagined the reveal. Not chaotic, not loud, cold, measured, eerily calm. The perfect psychological strike. I could almost hear their disbelief, their shock. Yes, they had underestimated me. They had forgotten that patience and observation are deadlier than rage. And when the moment came, they wouldn't just lose face, they would understand, fully and completely, that their control had been an illusion all along. The results came quietly, almost unassumingly. I had sent the documents, the traces, the records, everything meticulously verified. Every signature, every transfer, every accidental oversight was catalogued. I stared at the report. My hands didn't shake. My breath remained even. My heart steady. It wasn't satisfaction yet. It was anticipation. The truth was finally in my grasp. I called my sister. Her voice was bright, careless, filled with that familiar arrogance. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply asked her to meet me at the old cafe we used to go to as kids. She laughed at the invitation, assuming it was nostalgic. She didn't know I had set the stage. When she arrived, I was already seated, calm, coffee steaming before me, a single folder in front. She looked at me, confused. Curiosity flickered across her face. I slid the folder toward her. "Open it," I said casually. Her hands trembled slightly. She pulled the documents out, scanning, eyes widening, disbelief spreading like wildfire. Every fraudulent transfer, every manipulated transaction, every deception meticulously documented. Everything she had assumed was hidden. "Where? How?" she stammered, her voice pitched with panic. I didn't answer. I let the silence do its work. Let the realization sink in. I could see the foundations of her world crumbling. She tried to speak, to deflect, to excuse. It was just. I cut her off with a single look. Cold. Calculated. I didn't need words. My gaze was enough to make her understand that this was not a game, not a tantrum to be laughed off. This was the proof of her arrogance, her betrayal, her underestimation of me. My parents called while we sat there. My phone buzzed on the table. Multiple alerts flashing lines of communication they assumed controlled me. They wanted explanations, tears, apologies. They wanted me to panic like they did. But I didn't. I simply watched her panic, her eyes darting between the folder and the phone. The realization was total. She had lived believing she had the upper hand. She had assumed I was weak, recovering, powerless. I had done nothing violent, no yelling, no confrontation, just evidence, patience, and timing. 2 months later, my phone exploded. Missed calls, texts, messages from every family member. They were frantic. They wanted control back. They wanted excuses, tears, any sign of weakness. But all they got was me calm, composed, untouchable. The folder had done its work. My sister's facade of superiority shattered. My parents' arrogance exposed. Every hidden betrayal laid bare. The truth was no longer my burden. It was their punishment. I leaned back, watched her break quietly across from me. No chaos, no screaming, just a cold, inevitable collapse of the world they had built on lies and favoritism. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Power doesn't roar. Power whispers, observes, waits, and then it strikes with precision. I didn't wait long. Timing was everything. The folder had done its initial work, but now the final move had to be executed. Precision, calm, calculated. I called my sister once more. This time, there was no hesitation in my voice, no room for manipulation. "Meet me at the office." Alone. She arrived, breathless, her eyes darting around as if expecting allies to appear and save her. There were none. Only me, only truth, only inevitability. I pushed the chair toward her. She sat reluctantly, suspicion cracking through her facade. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. The folder rested between us, a silent predator. I opened my laptop and projected the account statements, the receipts, the emails, every single thing, each line a precise, unbroken trail of deceit and entitlement. Her face drained of color. "I see now," she whispered, almost a plea. I didn't respond. I let her voice fade into silence. She had nothing to explain, nothing to justify. Every excuse she had held onto was worthless. I reached for my phone. A single call. My parents' numbers filled the screen. I sent one text. "Check your bank now." Their calls didn't matter. They didn't deserve my voice. They deserved the weight of what they had ignored for decades. She tried to interrupt, to stammer, to claim she didn't understand. Her words fell flat, broken, like shards of glass against concrete. I leaned back and watched. The calm I exuded was suffocating. "I already knew," I said finally, soft, cold. "Every missed call, every fake smile, every calculated slight. I knew. I waited. Her lips trembled. Panic spread from her chest to her eyes. You can't. I didn't finish her sentence. There was no need. The evidence was speaking louder than any words I could muster. The look in her eyes confirmed it. She knew I had trapped her all along, and the trap had been perfectly set. I closed the laptop. The weight of silence returned. I let the room breathe. I let her suffocate in her own realization. I stood. She followed with fearful eyes. But I didn't move toward her. I moved past her. My footsteps echoed down the corridor. Every step, a statement. Every pause, a message. Remember, I said over my shoulder, almost casually, power isn't taken. It's allowed. And I never allowed you to control me. I walked out. No look back. No lingering. The rain outside matched my mood, cold, relentless, cleansing. 2 months later, my phone exploded. 68 missed calls. Messages flooding in from every family member. Panic, regret, fear. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They had seen the full measure of their mistakes. They had watched the calm, calculated dismantling of their world. And all they could do was realize, I had already won. Revenge wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was precise. It was the patient strike of someone who had been underestimated for too long. I closed the door behind me. Silence. Satisfaction. Power regained. The silence afterward was heavier than the confrontation. Not empty. Final. I stopped counting the missed calls after 100. The numbers blurred together: parents, cousins, uncles. Numbers I hadn't saved because they never mattered. Now, they all wanted something from me. Closure. Forgiveness. A chance to explain. I gave them none. I lay back against the headboard, the scar on my spine still fresh, still aching. Pain had become familiar, predictable. Unlike people, pain never pretended to love you while carving pieces out of your life. I thought about the wedding, the flowers already ordered, the hall already paid for, the guests already invited, all built on money that was never theirs. They would explain it however they wanted. Family emergency, misunderstanding, bad luck. People like them always rewrite history when it stops favoring them. But I had stopped participating in their stories. My phone vibrated again. A voicemail from my father. His voice was smaller now. No authority, no righteousness, just fear dressed up as regret. We didn't know it would turn out like this. That was the lie they always used. They knew. They just didn't care. I deleted the message without finishing it. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel angry, not even satisfied, just clear. As if something heavy had finally slid off my chest. I could see the pattern now. Every moment lined up perfectly. The way my needs were always postponed. The way my sisters' wants were treated as emergencies. The way my pain was dismissed as inconvenience. I hadn't lost a family. I had escaped a system. The wedding went ahead without me. Smaller, quieter, tense. People whispered instead of laughed. My absence sat heavier than my presence ever had. Every smile was forced. Every photo carefully framed to hide the cracks. I didn't watch. I didn't ask. I didn't care. I spent that day learning how to walk again without assistance. One slow step at a time. Each step painful. Each step mine. They wanted answers. I wanted distance. They wanted reconciliation. I wanted control. And control doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It closes accounts. It locks doors. It walks away. Weeks later, the call stopped. Silence replaced desperation. I knew what that meant. They had moved on to someone else to lean on. Someone new to drain. Good. Let them. I looked at my reflection in the window that night. Older. Harder, awake in a way I hadn't been before. The person staring back at me wasn't broken by betrayal. They were shaped by it. I turned off my phone. I turned off the lights. And for the first time since the surgery, since the voicemail, since the betrayal, I slept without waiting for someone to take something from me again. They called it family. I call it a closed account.